All right, let's get right into it. I want you to picture something. Imagine a country that's smaller than a golf course. Seriously, it has no army, no nukes, not really any economy to speak of. And yet, this tiny little state has whispered in the ears of world leaders, helped bring down entire empires, and even pulled the world back from the brink of nuclear war. We are talking, of course, about the Holy See, and its power is unlike anything else on Earth. It's a total paradox, right? That's the big question we're going to tackle here. How on earth does this place, with basically zero of what we call hard power, manage to be such a massive player on the world stage? Well, the answer isn't about force. It's about a completely different kind of game, one built on strategy, history, and the power of persuasion. And this really gets us to the heart of what I call the power paradox. You know, we're all taught to think about global power in terms of missiles and money and military might. But what happens when one of the most influential players on the board doesn't really have any of that? I mean, if you just looked at the stats on paper, you'd probably write the Holy See off completely. But somehow its voice carries all the way to the United Nations and into the capitals of the world's biggest superpowers. So to understand why, we have to go back in time, way back. See, this story really kicks off more than 1,000 years ago. And it's all about one of the most incredible transformations you'll ever hear. It's the story of how the papacy gave up a physical kingdom for a global empire built purely on influence, and it is a fascinating tale. For hundreds of years, starting way back in the 8th century, the Pope was an actual king. He ruled over a big chunk of Italy called the Papal States, fought wars, the whole deal. But then, boom, 1870. Italy unifies, captures Rome, and suddenly the Pope calls himself a prisoner in the Vatican. Then you fast forward to 1929, when the Lateran Treaty with Italy creates the tiny Vatican City we know today. So it looked like the end of an empire, but really it was the birth of something new. A modern, global powerhouse built not on land, but on influence. And this brings us to a really, really important distinction we have to make. Vatican City is the place, right? It's the 110-acre sovereign territory. But the power, that's the Holy See. It's the ancient government of the entire Catholic Church. It's the entity that signs treaties and sends ambassadors. And get this, it's been recognized as a sovereign power for centuries, even when it had no land at all. So think of it this way. The Holy See is the government, and Vatican City is just its capital. So if the Holy See isn't using tanks and banks, what are its weapons? Well, they're what experts call soft power. The ability to get what you want through attraction and persuasion rather than threats and payments. So let's break down the actual tools it uses to project its power across the globe. What's this number? 184. That is the number of countries the Holy See has formal diplomatic relations with. Its network of embassies, which are called Apostolic Nunciatures, is one of the oldest and biggest in the world. We're talking in the same league as the United States and China. That's some serious reach. But these diplomats, these nuncios, they're not just your average ambassadors. Oh no, they're the Pope's personal eyes and ears on the ground. They're gathering information, they're quietly advising governments, and they play a huge role in picking local bishops, which basically steers the direction of the church in that entire country. Plus, they run massive networks for humanitarian aid. Okay, another piece of the puzzle. A very special status at the United Nations. As a permanent observer, the Holy See gets a seat at the table. It can speak in debates, shape documents on everything from human rights to climate change. But here's the brilliant part. It doesn't get a vote. And that's a feature, not a bug. It lets them stay strategically neutral, to act as a moral voice without getting dragged into the messy geopolitics of taking sides. And then you have what you could call the moral bombshells. These are encyclicals. They're basically open letters from the Pope to the world, and they can completely reframe a global debate and rally millions of people around a single idea. I mean, think about it. Pacem in Terris helped shape the whole conversation around peace and human rights right after the Cuban Missile Crisis. Populorum Progressio took on global inequality. And just a few years ago, Pope Francis's Laudato Si became a key text for the entire climate change movement. These aren't just religious papers. They are powerful documents that have genuinely shaped world policy. So we've seen the playbook. We've seen the tools. Now, let's look at the highlight reel. The moments where the Holy See stepped onto the field and actually changed the course of history. October 1962. The world is literally holding its breath. The US and the Soviet Union are eyeball to eyeball, about to launch nuclear weapons. And right at that critical moment, Pope John XXIII goes on the radio and begs world leaders not to be deaf to the cry of humanity. The Soviet leader, Nikita Khrushchev, later said that message was the only gleam of hope. It gave both sides the political cover they needed to back down without looking weak.
All right, let's jump forward about 15 years. A Polish pope, John Paul II, goes back to his homeland. His visit in 1979 is widely seen as the spark that lit the fuse for the Solidarity movement. He held secret meetings, he formed a quiet alliance with President Ronald Reagan, and he inspired local churches to become these little hubs of resistance that helped, piece by piece, to bring down the entire Iron Curtain.
And much more recently, in 2014, Pope Francis stepped in as the ultimate mediator. He personally wrote letters to President Obama and President Castro, pushing them to end a half-century of hostility. And then, the Vatican actually hosted the secret meetings between US and Cuban officials that led directly to restoring diplomatic relations. Incredible.
Okay, so we've talked about secret meetings, a global intelligence network, changing the course of history. It's easy for your mind to go to a pretty conspiratorial place, right? So let's just get a step back and really separate what's real from what's just fiction. So what's the deal? Is the Holy See some kind of secret society in ancient robes pulling all the strings of global power from behind the scenes?
Well, the truth is actually a lot simpler, and in a way, much more powerful. It's not about secret control. It's about open, overt moral persuasion. The power isn't hidden, it's just misunderstood. It's exercised right out in the open for anyone who's paying attention. So when you boil it all down, the Holy See's real power comes from this unique mix. It's the moral authority it holds for over 1 billion followers. It's that massive global network of people and institutions. It's centuries of diplomatic experience. It's a reputation for neutrality that makes it a trusted mediator. And maybe most of all, it's a consistent public voice for peace and human dignity. Which kind of leaves us with one last big question to think about. In our messy, chaotic world, a world obsessed with hard power, with military and economic might, is it possible that the most powerful weapon of all isn't a weapon at all? Perhaps true, lasting influence comes from something else entirely: moral authority.